Hello, everybody. My name is Ray. Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. Today, we're going to be talking about the He Gets Us campaign and how their Super Bowl commercials were not well received by their target audience. It turns out that the woke Jesus of He Gets Us is still not woke enough. And that's very apparent in the reaction to their commercials. So we're going to talk about that. But first, I want to let you know Evangelical Dark Web is a Christian news gathering commentary ministry, and you can support us by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. If you are new, that's the least you can do. Otherwise, we have more articles at evangelicaldarkweb.org, and you can support us through our Patreon-like system at evangelicaldarkweb.org/join. So let's dive on in. We're gonna go through this article that I wrote called "The He Gets Us campaign." The He Gets Us woke Jesus wasn't woke enough and never will be. So it's amazing how many liberals save their outrage for the He Gets Us commercials, which aired during the Super Bowl. And I want to point this out because we knew this was coming. We knew the He Gets Us campaign commercials were coming. They've been floating them all season long. If you've been watching mainly football. They've been advertising heavily, and all of a sudden you get a lot of liberal outrage. And last week, the Evangelical Dark Web did a nice expose on the He Gets Us, and we exposed a lot of the faces and people behind this campaign, and you should definitely watch that video or read that article. So we exposed some of the people behind that, which included David Green of Hobby Lobby and Signatory, which is like a DAF. We talked about that. It's ironic as it may seem, David Green would partner with pro-abortion firms to market Jesus. I think that's highly ironic for the president of Hobby Lobby to have done. So what we're answering in this video is what the ROI was for investing tens of millions of dollars on Super Bowl ads. And as it would seem, the exact people the ads were marketed to did not like them. So to summarize the He Gets Us campaign ads, they spent millions of dollars to market Jesus as a refugee/illegal immigrant, which, by the way, The Chosen does that same thing as well. They go with the Jesus was a refugee thing as well. They also want to market Jesus as a rebel with a cause, which, again, get used to different, by the way. I ought to do a video on how The Chosen and He Gets Us are like the same Jesus. We should totally do a deep dive on that. And someone who bridges political divides, which is definitely not Jesus. So the problem is that Jesus depicted in the scripture is none of these things. Fleeing Egypt briefly would have made the Holy Family wouldn't have made the Holy Family refugees. It would have actually made them fugitives of an evil king, that is King Herod. Jesus was never a rebel. We are the rebels, while Jesus rules at the right hand of the Father. And Jesus creates political divides, a divide between good and evil, a division between those who pronounce Christ as king versus those who serve their father, the devil. He Gets Us wants us to believe that Jesus loved everybody we hate. And while Jesus condemns private revenge and personal grudges, to say that Jesus loved everybody, never used violence, and accepted everybody isn't biblically supported. You need to look no further than Judas. And I would argue, and this is a hot take, that Jesus hated Judas. If you look at how chosen Judas was for a spectacular kind of rejection, I don't know how you argue that Jesus loved Judas. Jesus says it was better for Judas to have never been born. So anyway, that's a hot take, but that's not here nor there. So Jacobin wrote a nice article about it, and they summarized it as upcoming Christian Super Bowl ads are framed as diverse and inclusive, but the money behind them comes from a rabidly anti-abortion and anti-gay organization. So that's talking about Hobby Lobby being the anti-abortion and Signatory being the anti-gay, respectively. And it's ironic, they hired a pro-abortion group to be the Don Draper on this campaign. pretty ironic. And then we got Sawyer Hackett, who's a Democrat operative, saying with the money that he gets us people spent on their right-wing Jesus ads, they could have permanently housed 1,563 people experiencing homelessness. And I don't know how they get the idea of permanently housing, but that math probably doesn't add up. Another thing is that this is also that mentality that Judas had. Speaking of Judas, when he said that, why aren't we selling this perfume to give to the poor? It's not a biblical mentality. Even if he's technically right that spending that money in that way would have been a better use of funds, maybe it would have been. I'll talk about what would have been a better use of the same amount of money in a second. Something tells me, and this is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and she made the most shockwaves. This tweet had millions of views, and Conservative Inc. clickbaited the crap out of this tweet. Something tells me, she tweets, Jesus would not have spent millions of dollars on Super Bowl ads to make fascism look benign. And that's not exactly what that commercial did. I know the commercial she's talking about. That's not really what it did, but I believe it did have some J6 imagery, as well as some Black Lives Matter imagery. And then Brooklyn Dad Defiant, and you gotta love Brooklyn Dad posting L's or whatever, that account. If Jesus were alive today, he'd say, hey, don't spend all those millions of dollars on a Super Bowl ad about me. Instead, use that money to feed the poor and house the unhoused. Sure, he gets us, but do we get him? And he actually ends that on a much more biblical note than pretty much every He Gets Us commercial. It's not about whether he gets us. It is more about whether we get him. And Ryan Sheed, I don't know who this guy is. Before the game starts, I wanted to take a second and talk about the He Gets Us commercials that will air today. When did the NFL start letting hate groups advertise on their platform? Tell me again who the groomers are. The irony there. And then we got Andrew Perez, and he talks about the bizarre He Gets Us advertisements. And here's the second He Gets Us about loving your enemies. Sounds nice if only He Gets Us parent group wasn't spending tens of millions funding homosexual transvestite hate groups. And then we got Fred Wellman, I guess another Democrat operative or podcaster, who knows. The angry people in the faces of the protesters in those He Gets Us commercials are the ones with Christian in their Twitter bios. Glossy, expensive propaganda, still just polished lies paid for by Hobby Lobby working to take away our rights. Now, glossy seems a little bit of an unmerited compliment. These commercials are pretty low quality, and that says a lot. The Super Bowl commercials have definitely taken a massive dip in quality over the years, although this year was better than last year. This year was much better than recent years. And I'm surprised by that. He Gets Us campaign is not the reason for this exception in the general trend of the deterioration of Super Bowl commercials, though. And unfortunately, high percentage of the population thinks like this. Like, these guys didn't get ratioed on Twitter for their biblically unsound and unacceptable views, responding to a biblically unsound and unacceptable commercial. But I do want to contrast that Christianity leads with the offensive parts first. When Paul preaches to Athens, when Peter preaches to the Jews in Jerusalem, he leads with the offense first. He doesn't hide the offensive parts of the gospel. Now, you got to contrast this because Christianity, or big evangelifishes, weren't the only ones advertising their religion during the Super Bowl. The Church of Scientology also advertised their religion during the Super Bowl. And their commercial was similarly bizarre, but is it a better commercial? Yes, because it wasn't pretentiously bad, or as pretentiously bad as the hundreds of millions of dollars sunk into the Super Bowl, or the He Gets Us campaign. But Scientology doesn't tell its people what it believes until they're years invested and have so much sunk cost and have been brainwashed into it. So they don't get to know what their church actually teaches. Christianity, teaches straight up what Jesus believes. We teach the gospel straight up, that there is a creation, that God is the creator, that mankind is fallen, human nature is fallen, we sinned, and we need Jesus Christ to redeem us of this sin. He needs to pay the penalty. He needs to suffer God's wrath in order that he might give us God's mercy, that Jesus dies and pays the penalty for our sin, raises again on the third day to make sure that, to prove that the atonement was complete, that he is indeed the Christ, and we have a restored relationship with God, and we can look forward to glorification with God as well. That's a little bit hard to preach in a Super Bowl ad spot, but nonetheless, if we want to get back to a more constructive view of what should have been done, a simple reading of John 14:6, Jesus answered, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me, would have been a far more potent use of the time and money. They would have received the same backlash from the same people, but at least they would have presented the real Jesus and have started a national conversation on the merits of the gospel rather than the vacuous fortune cookie nature of the He Gets Us campaign. Our call is to preach the gospel, and the He Gets Us campaign is an absolute waste of money and potential to this end. The He Gets Us campaign and their Jesus is woke, and it will never be woke enough to satisfy them. So that's where I want to leave off. My name is Ray. This is the Evangelical Dark Web. If you like this video, also subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, have a blessed day, and we will catch you on the next one.